Tugging Los until 10 on the morning. Extra on Extra 1063. Thank you for being here. 404-741-1230, the number. And at Extra 1063 across the social media platforms as we welcome Congressman Rich McCormick to the show. And he was up in our neck of the woods. Obviously, he represents Georgia's 7th District, which both Carlos and I live in. And you were up at the Lake Lanier Management offices talking about losing nearly $500 million a week because the Senate Democrats won't pass this clean CR to open the government back up. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good to be with you guys, and good to be able to explain what's going on, how we got here, and how we're going to get out.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that bothers people the most. This is something that the Democrats have passed over and over and over again. There's nothing in the CR that changes anything. It just continues funding the government until you can negotiate, you can work it out, which is exactly what our elected representatives are supposed to do, and they just refuse. I hear they're going to do it after this crazy, silly No Kings protest over the weekend.
Yeah, the anti-American protest is going to be their last hurrah. I think they'll fold after that. This is a guess, though. Schumer's kind of in control of that. Let's talk about how we got here, though. This is really important that people understand it. What they're claiming is we're cutting Medicare supplementation. That's not the case. First of all, when they came up with the Affordable Care Act, the whole premise, the only way they could get it passed with their votes, which they got 100% of all votes for, is by having the federal government eventually retract their supplementation of what's supposed to be a state-run program, which is Medicaid. There's no way they would have passed it in the beginning. Affordable Care Act would have never passed had all the federal supplementation been permanent. It never would have passed. They never would have gotten the votes, the Democrat votes they needed for it. But now they're trying to say, even though that's always been the agreement, that we're going to continue to decrease federal investment because, remember, only about a third of all government spending used to be federal. Now it's 2/3 and going north of that really quickly. And we're just printing the money, and that's going to go on the backs of our children or grandchildren. That's not good. But they want to say, all of a sudden, they want to claim that we're cutting it. We're not cutting anything. Matter of fact, the Medicaid adjustments we made for this year was just getting rid of waste, fraud, abuse. Not just illegal immigrants, but quite frankly, people who are sitting at home who can work but just refuse to work. And I'm not, by the way, the requirements that we have are less than that of going and getting your workers' comp or that you pay into. When you get unemployment, that is money you paid into. This is not that. But you have to do certain requirements to get that money. For Medicaid, all you have to do is do volunteer work or work 20 hours a week or get training to do some sort of job. But the worst possible thing you can do, and take this as an ER doc. Most people who come to the emergency department who have depression, anxiety, suicidality, drug and alcohol abuse have one thing in common. They don't have anything going in life. They're self-consumed, and it's not good for you. The worst thing you could do is sit at home without a job, without any volunteer work, without being trained for something to do in life, and not participate in society. So everything we require is actually common sense, and the average American is very much on board with that. But the Democrats want to shut down the government over this, and like you said, they don't even want to come to board and do a normal budget. They just want to shut down. They want to hold us hostage for $1.5 trillion just in 1 year. That is unsustainable. We're already at 30% deficit spending. It's not going to work.
Dr. Rich McCormick is our guest on the Morning Extra, and let's talk about one of the other pain points that the Democrats were looking to hit with this, and this was the availability to get pay to our men and women in the military. Now, that has been solved for the time being, but again, we'll talk about the end of the month as it comes around. Do you look at that as being kind of a bridge to at least alleviate one of those big pain points, and hopefully the Democrat pain points will kick in next week and they will then make a deal?
Well, so President Trump has lifted mountains in order to make sure the troops get paid, make sure that the women and children who are destitute are getting the supplementation they need. But that's going to run out eventually. What's dishonest about this is we had a bill on the floor last year that made sure if we did have a government shutdown, the troops would get paid regardless. And guess who didn't even take it up in the Senate? Schumer refused to vote on it. So the reason that they're not getting paid right now, they got paid because President Trump moved some money around. But if they don't get paid, that's because Schumer refused to vote on it because he wanted this. He wanted the troops not to get paid, so it would be painful for people, and then try to take credit, or if you will, they're going to take blame, I hope, for what they're trying to do is make this painful for us so that we'll negotiate failure for the future of America. And that's the dishonest thing about this whole argument.
U.S. Representative Dr. Rich McCormick on the Morning Extra, Tug and Los until 10. The reason I know that they're taking the blame for it, we talked about this on the show a couple days ago. It was on the 15th, and there were 0 articles about the shutdown in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or the Washington Post.
We went 3 hours of watching Morning Joe, and they didn't touch it one time.
That's how we know, Dr. McCormick, that they know they're taking a beating on this.
I'm glad. They need to take a beating on this. They've lost their rudder. They've lost any moderation. They've lost common sense. They certainly don't want to follow the Constitution. That's why they're losing. They're the gift that keeps on giving.
As a doctor, a man who has worked in healthcare for a big portion of your life, how do we fix this healthcare system? Because Obamacare was meant to fail. We've talked about that on the show 1,000 times. It was meant to crumble. That way they could get to a single-payer system, and that's not what the American people want. How do we fix this healthcare system, Dr. McCormick?
Yeah, so first of all, realize we're going to pay $5.7 trillion is going to be spent on healthcare next year in America, or this year in America, in 2025. $5.7 trillion as a percentage of economy that's far and above twice what any other country spends on healthcare by percentage. By itself, just the amount we spend on healthcare would be the 3rd largest economy in the world. It is going up dramatically every year. Since the Affordable Care Act back in 2010, insurance companies are making 230% more net profit than they did before. And meanwhile, your premiums have gone up almost 90%. The average family will this year spend around $32,000 per family of 4, on health care. Your deductibles, your copays are going up. We've been trained to do the wrong thing. This is all about profiteering. When you have 4 of the top 10 companies in America being either pharmaceuticals or insurance companies, 7 of the top 20, and they are doing nothing more than making massive amounts of cash that they never made before the Affordable Care Act, you know who's paying for it. We, the American people, both in your tax dollars, which take up about 30%, actually over 30% of all mandatory spending, which is a considerable chunk of money, over $2 trillion goes towards Medicare, Medicaid, and Obamacare. And then on top of that, you have your private insurance. That's all going to somebody else for very little return on investment. The way we get out of this is, first of all, we turn Medicaid back over to states, which are much more accountable. The federal government does not run anything well. Trust me. As a military guy, you got to have the military in charge by the federal government, but it is very inefficient because of that. We have a lot of contracts that are wasted. We don't want the federal government running healthcare. I promise you, it's not inexpensive. It's the most expensive way to do it. I'll give you an example. Here's how we get out. We got to do it with competition. Get rid of the regulation to keep other people from competing with these bloated insurance companies that basically monopolize the system and force all doctors, along with the federal government, into a single-payer hospital system, which is way more expensive. It used to be about 17% of all doctors at the Affordable Care Act work for hospitals. Now it's about 80%. That's just in a short, 15 years. And doctors make 30% less. And every time they go into a hospital system, it costs you 30% more. That's really bad math. But let me give you an example of how it can work. When things are not covered by insurance, when it's paid out of pocket, when it's something like LASIK eye surgery, it used to cost twice as expensive as it does now. And that was back in the 1990s, 30 years ago. And that's not counting inflation, by the way. Half as much. Why? Because it wasn't required to be paid for by insurance companies or the government. So you had natural competition forcing the price point down for a better product. That's how you solve this problem. When you force people to use insurance for everything they do in healthcare, the price point always goes up. The insurance companies are licking their chops. The pharmaceuticals get paid a percentage of everything when they use your insurance to pay for pharmaceuticals, and we all lose. In my opinion, healthcare should only be catastrophic, and then if you used your car insurance to change your car oil or to have your engine replaced every time something happened or anything happens wrong in your car, everything would be 10 times more expensive. Changing your car oil will cost you $200 at least, because that's how insurance works. It adds a whole bunch of paperwork and a whole bunch of overhead. We need to get away from that model.
Congressman Dr. Rich McCormick is our guest, and I want to ask you about this because since the last time we got a chance to speak, we now have a peace deal in the Middle East, and I believe this is going to give President Donald Trump a lot of political capital moving forward if this deal holds. How do you expect him to use it? What do you think's next as part of this administration's agenda?
Well, first of all, think about what he's been able to achieve. I think he's ended like 8 wars now. The fact that he has that leverage is phenomenal. That's a big investment that we've made in Israel as allies and also financially, but they also help stabilize that region, actually save us money in the long run, somebody we can rely on. I think this will benefit the Palestinians in that region. There's a lot of innocent people who suffered dramatically to become Hamas, and the war that they picked on October 7th. They're the ones that invaded Israel. Israel was not in Gaza when Israel was invaded. They weren't. They hadn't been there for quite some time. They were invaded by a bunch of radicals trying to start a war. Think about it. They knew they weren't going to win that. They were trying to turn the tide of opinion against Israel, which it probably worked in some ways, but it also created a horrible amount of destruction and human life loss because of that. And I think President Trump needs to be given massive credit, even Hillary Clinton. And many Democrats
of all people
tipping their hat. Yeah, but she tipped her hat to Trump and said, you know what? Much respect. He's done an amazing thing that nobody else seems to have been able to do. Let's just see if it holds, and I hope and pray it does.
Yes, sir. I as well. Dr. Rich McCormick, our guest on the Morning Extra and Xtra 1063. What do you think about SCOTUS and the view of racial gerrymandering? Because we've discussed that at length, too, and then the possibility of Republicans gaining as many as 19 seats, maybe even more, depending on how it goes, if that ability is struck down to gerrymander along racial lines.
Well, so for those people who are worried, and people who don't know, I taught at the AUC, Morehouse, Spelman, Clark, Atlanta for 4 years, and went to Morehouse School of Medicine, was student body president, elected the same year as Obama was elected president. I have great compassion for the future of minorities in Georgia and around the United States. We have the second highest percentage of Black population in the nation by percentage, and the second highest by number also. And if you think about the future of Black people in America, getting them gerrymandered into more representation has never helped them, ever. And if you think this is about getting Black representation, I mean, that's a ridiculous statement when you consider the percentages that have been manipulated by other states. This is all about power over the most powerful government in the entire world. But if you look at Massachusetts, 0 of 9 seats are Republican. Connecticut, 0 of 5 seats. Oregon, 1 of 6. New Jersey, 3 of 12. That's 25%. Maryland, 1 of 8, 13%. New York, 27%. California, 17%. Illinois, 18%. Washington, 20%. What I'm trying to make a case is, it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with power. The Democrats have been gerrymandering their states for decades, and we've done nothing about it. This is to get rid of this additional gerrymandering based on this premise of race. This isn't about race. This is about power, and the Democrats want power. If they thought that the proponents of Blacks in the South were going to vote Democrat, they wouldn't even be making a peep about this. They could care less. And as a matter of fact, I want to make a point to all those Black listeners out there right now. Tell me what the Democrats have done for you. I'd like to know, and compare it to what Trump has done. And I would make the case that the Democrats have, for now decades, let you down. And it's time to have an awakening. And you're seeing plenty of Black Republicans come into Congress now and doing a great job of improving conditions for everybody in America.
And I want to echo that. Dr. Rich McCormick is our guest right here on the Morning Extra. My point about when you start getting rid of gerrymandered districts, now when it becomes about better representation, it's not just about one person who's trying to say, okay, I've got one group of people here and this is all they care about. Suddenly, when you have a diverse community, then you better be pretty diverse and be pretty creative with your opinions. To me, I think you get better representation that way when you send somebody to Washington.
Amen, brother. Remember that my district is about 40% minorities, and we had the most voter participation in Georgia by almost 5% to the second place. And we also had the best results for the conservative voters out there. I embrace that. I think it's good for us to have diversity. I think that's part of America, but we cannot sit there and race bait and put one race against each other. We're all on the same team. Indeed, we're all the same human race. I do want to judge people by their merit. This is a meritocracy ultimately. People who work harder and are more talented will achieve more. But I tell you, I always put my money on the person who works harder over the person who has better ability.
Amen to that, man. No question about it. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. McCormick. It's always refreshing to hear from you and listen to the way you're thinking about some of the issues that are facing America, and it's always right in line with where we are. We appreciate you and support you anytime. You're always welcome.
Appreciate you guys, too. I really do. You guys are doing God's work. Hope you have a blessed day and Semper Fi.
Yes, sir. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, sir.